In this video, we're going to carry on modeling our Ferrari 308 in Fusion 360. Hey everyone, this is Matt with Learn Everything About Design, and today we're going to carry on with the Ferrari 308, and we're going to start building the body toward the rear quarter. So this is going to be the next challenge for us, and that's how to combine a new body with an existing body that has symmetry. So in order to do this, let's go ahead and get started by either carrying on with your model or downloading the one from the description of the video. Then we're going to go to Create a Cylinder. We're going to select our right plane, and we're going to place it at the center of the rear wheel. And just like we did at the front, we're going to go ahead and create one that is roughly at that inside diameter of the lip. We want to use the same settings, which means that we're going to have 2 height faces, and we'll use 8 diameter faces. We'll say OK, and then we'll go into Bodies, and we'll select Body 3, use Modify Edit Form. This time we're going to view this from the back. We're going to hide the front canvas and show the back canvas, and we want to pull this out to the location of the rear fender. So that looks pretty good. It's going to be hard to tell. In general, these cars would have a little bit wider rear, but when we look at this from the top, it's actually fairly slim. So we're going to stick it at roughly the same spot as the front one, maybe just a hair wider. The next thing that we need to do is we need to get rid of the bottom half. So just like we did before, we're going to select and delete the bottom half. We're going to take this into box display as well as our original body, and then we want to begin manipulating its position. So once again, we'll go to Modify Edit Form. We'll view this from the right, and we're going to box select those bottom vertices, and we'll pull them up to about the right location. And then we're going to move these middle ones. Again, remember that we are trying to get a consistent distance between these. So that's the entire reason why we want to move the middle point. Otherwise, we won't have a true cylindrical profile. Now, honestly, because we've already modified this, it's not a true cylinder anymore, and we're not going to get one. We can get pretty close, but we're not going to get a true cylinder unless we use tools like Match and we have a sketch that we want to align it to. Next thing we want to do is we want to go ahead and select that edge. And again, I'm on a PC, so I'm going to be holding down Alt and then Control, and then I'm going to scale that out. If you're on a Mac, I believe that's going to be it's going to be Option and then Command. And once we do that, remember that's going to extrude with a crease. We're going to go ahead and pull these different vertices to be at the right position. I'm looking to get them about perpendicular to where the curvature is going to be. Now, when we're looking at this in box display, it's a little bit harder to tell, but in smooth display, you can see that that is roughly going to be normal or perpendicular to the tangency or the curvature at that point. So we've made that first lip, and the rear is very similar to the front. So I'm going to double click this. I'm going to view it from the back. And once again, I'm going to do Alt and Control to extrude with a crease, and I'm going to make a little lip here. Now, the way that we did this on the front was we took it almost straight back. So let's go ahead and let's just bring it perfectly straight back. And now we've started the fender flare. All right, so there's going to be a bit of work that happens in order to get this fender flare combined to the body. But before I get to that point, I want to begin manipulating the vertices. So the upper section is going to go essentially straight back to give us that flare, but the bottom sort of disappears into the body line. So these bottom edges are going to have to be in line, or the bottom vertices, I should say, have to be in line with the body. So I'm going to take those to roughly straight. You'll notice that when we look at the blueprint from this angle, that this actually tends to flare back a little bit. So if we want to take care of that, we can box select and we can pull this back a little bit. And then we want to redo that, and we want to pull this back one back a little bit. And then we'll take that last vertex and we'll stretch it out. It's probably a good idea to bring these 2 vertices forward a little bit. So I'm going to pull them in, and then that should be good. So now let's hide our canvases for a second, and let's go to smooth display. We'll go to smooth display for everything, and let's just see what we've done. All right, so that doesn't look like much yet, and that's because we haven't combined it with anything. The next step in the process is we need to identify the edges or vertices that we're going to be attaching to. And we don't have one in the middle right now. We tried our best to place this one, But when we go back to box display, you can see that it has moved. So I'm going to double click on that edge. I'm going to go to slide edge, and I'm going to just simply try to pull it to be a little bit closer. We need to double check the curvature. So we want to go back to smooth and just make sure that we're not too far off. Obviously, we can manipulate all this later on, but we want to make sure that we're at least pretty close. Now that we are getting close to combining, we have to consider how much control we need. The front fender actually has a little bit more character or flair to it. The rear fender sort of just blends into the body line. So there's not a whole lot that we're going to need in the back, but one thing that we do have to consider is that, again, we're dealing with a body that has symmetry, and this is a new single body. So let's go to symmetry. Let's try mirror duplicate, and let's try to duplicate this new fender well. When we duplicate it, notice that now we've got two bodies, but they're combined into this body 3, and that's because it's got symmetry. If we go to modify and weld vertices, and we try to put this vertex to this one, notice that it pulls the other one over. So that worked out pretty well, and we should now see just one single body. That's not always the case. If it fails to do that, then what you're going to see is everything turns red and you'll get a warning. If that happens, continue to weld vertices, see if you can get it to actually work. If not, then you'll probably need to do the method that we did on the front where we deleted half of the body. We got rid of symmetry first, deleted half, built out the fender, and then we added the symmetry back. This is not going to go to smooth display yet because we've only got that single vertex. We need to connect it to the rest of the fender. When we look at this from the side, we can potentially carry this line down to here, but we need something in the middle. And in order to do that, we can either use insert edge or insert point. And I'm going to use insert point. I'm going to snap in the middle. I'm going to snap to this edge. I'm going to come down and say OK. So this is going to give me another sort of piece of information that I need to connect the two. Now, here is a critical step in the design process that we need to be mindful of. We have welded vertices up here, and in doing so, we are now creating essentially a triangular patch that's going to happen. If that's not going to work for our design, then we're going to have to be mindful and potentially add some additional edges and make things sort of blend in better. But for right now, let's go ahead and run with it and just see how it looks. So in order to do this, I'm going to take this edge here. I'm going to go to Modify, Edit Form. Holding down Alt, I'm going to extrude this down. And the idea here is that I am going to build out the body shape. I'm going to connect these. And I can already tell you, just looking at this, this is not the correct solution. And the reason this is not the correct solution is because this four-sided patch is not going to blend very well with the rest of the body. Really what should happen is this should come straight down, and this vertex should come to here. And then this leaves me with a four-sided patch over here. Now, Fusion is not going to like it, but it still does leave me a patch. So let's try this method. We're going to go to Modify, Weld Vertices, and again, select the one that you want to move, and then the one you want it to go. And then now we've connected those. Now we've got this sort of four-sided patch. We need to decide how this is going to work. And there are a couple tools that we could use. We could manually extrude it. We could use something like fill hole, and that would work here. So let's go ahead and try fill hole. And it failed to generate, so let's select all the edges. And it doesn't like that. If we try to do a fill star, it doesn't like that. If we try to do a collapse, it does not like that. It just will not create that triangular patch. So the way that I am going to do this is I'm going to go to Modify, Edit Form, and I'm going to take this edge, and from the right-hand view, I'm going to extrude this out. Now, again, I already mentioned that this is not going to give us the level of control that we want. It's just not going to work, but I'm still going to try, and we can at least have this as a test to see if it works, and if it doesn't, we'll just scratch some of this and we'll start over. So now we'll weld vertices. We'll bring this one to here, and notice that this one is kind of sort of hanging out. It has nothing to do. So I'm going to take that, and I'm going to weld it back to here, which turns this into a triangular patch. If I try to go to smooth display, notice that it's not allowing it. You can't tell because I'm hitting it on the keyboard, but notice that it's not allowing it. Let's try to use fill hole one more time. Let's see if we can fill this triangular section. We were able to fill that triangular section. That patch did work. I'm going to say okay. And then I want to fill the rest of this in. I'm going to go back to box display. And essentially what we want to do is we want to put that vertex in the correct location. And to do this, we're going to go to the top. We're going to bring our canvases back. And we're going to pull this out to the body line. And also note that this one here is really inset. So I'm going to pull this out to the body line, and I'm going to pull this out as well. Then from here, it's pretty straightforward. We could use bridge, we could use an extrude, and since we're already here in Edit 4, I'm just going to go ahead and extrude this forward, and then I'm going to say OK. Once again, we'll use Weld Vertices. I'm going to go the one I want to move to the one where I want it to go. And now we've essentially patched this side. So let's step back and let's take a look at what we've done. I'm going to go into Smooth Display, and I'm going to hide the canvases, and I'm actually going to turn the edges off. So in Smooth Display, we've got that nice sort of, the traditional shape that we would expect to see from this car. It's got the nice curves. It's flaring out like we would expect. I'm probably not super happy with this area here. This still needs some work, but the rest of it looks pretty good. Now, when I say this area, notice that this is a single patch. That's a single face, but when we look at the curvature on it, it sort of dips in and it has some problems there. And the reason for that is because we have a crease on this edge. And we have a crease on that edge and we're trying to sort of blend things in, and that's causing some problems. Now, we could uncrease just this edge and we could see what it looks like. So let's try that. And then let's turn the edges off and take a look. So now you can see that it uncreased up to about here, and then it's sort of blending in. That's okay, but it doesn't look like the car. It's just not right. So I'm going to do a Control-Z undo. I'm going to bring back my edges. I'm going to go into box display. When I'm looking at box display and I'm looking at the way that this layout is done, I want to change some of it. It's going to be hard to do. Let's double click the mouse wheel. It's going to be hard to do just because of where it is. It's sort of hidden. So we're going to have to use these modify tools and make sure that we're staying in plane. I'm going to move up. I'm going to move this one up a little bit, and then I want to pull it forward. Now let's go back to smooth display. And that is much better. So it still has a little bit of a dip in, but that is a much better transition. What we're doing is we're looking at the light. I am not happy with the patch layout here with this sort of bulge and flare, but I'm not going to worry about it until I reconnect the rest of the body. So let's go back to box display, and we need to insert another edge. We're going to have another edge here to connect to. So let's say okay. Let's go to Modify, Insert Point. Once again, I like to go to the midpoint, which is where the red dots are, and it just helps me break things up evenly, so I know that the size of the patch on both sides is consistent. From here, now we need to decide again where to go, and I'm going to take both of these edges and I'm going to extrude them down. So from my right-hand view, holding down Alt, I'm going to bring both of them down. When I do that, I do also want to go to a back view, because they are well inset from the geometry. So I'm going to bring them sort of over to the right position, keeping in mind we can always move things later. We're not stuck exactly where we put everything. We do have flexibility, but there has to be a starting point. We have to make a decision at some point along the design in order to progress. So in this case, I'm going to move this vertex back to try to get this to be more of a straight line. I'm going to bring this one probably down. Again, I don't really have the midline shown, so I'm just kind of guessing, but we can address all that later. Now I want to weld these together. So I'm going to go to Modify, Weld Vertices, the one I want to move, where I want it to go, and now I'm left with the same sort of triangular section. So in order to make this work, again, I'm going to just do an extrude, hold down Alt, bring this forward. And the way that this is going to work, once again, is I'm going to weld the vertices from where they are to where I want them to go. And then this one I need to combine to turn that into a triangle. Once that's a triangle, I can try to do a fill hole and fill this section, say okay, and let's take a look at this in smooth display. I like to make sure I hide the edges so that I'm not focused on the patch layout, but that looks pretty good. I still really don't like the way that these are sort of progressing at the bottom, but it does have the curvature and the shape that we're looking at. So if we look at it from the top, keeping in mind that top doesn't have perspective, when we were looking at this, we were looking in orthographic. So from the top down, that looks pretty close. Obviously, we still need to fix the front. It comes to more of a sharp corner here. And this back does need to come out. So I'm going to modify this. I'm going to bring the back out. I'm going to do this in box display. And the reason I want to do this in box display is because I'm going to move this entire edge back. And I'm going to move this one in because from the blueprint, it looks like it has sort of like a taper in right here. And I'm going to use Alt-3 to go back to my smooth display, and that looks pretty good. Another thing that we do want to consider when we're looking at this patch layout is another way that we could carry these lines. So right now, these vertices are welded right here, and we made these triangular patches. But we could do this by creating a four-sided patch. And we're going to try it real quick, but before we do, let's make a quick save. That way, if we have to come back, we don't have to worry about losing any of our work. We're going to go to Insert Point, and I'm going to come from this point. I'm going to go to the mid and back down here, making these two triangles. The reason I'm doing that is because now I can come in, I can select these two and delete them. And what happened is I created four-sided patches that go around the fender now. So this is going to give me better curvature. It's going to be easier to work with. The next thing that I want to do is I want to turn this into a four-sided patch. So once again, insert point. I'm going to come from here. I'm going to take it to the mid and say OK. And then I'm going to delete this edge. So this four-sided patch, once again, is going to give me much better geometry. So this is kind of why I'm saying that you need to make a design decision, but you don't have to be stuck with it. We can come back and we can redefine the edges and we can get that four-sided patch that we want. So now we're taking a four-sided patch all the way along here and directly into the fender. And then we can carry that four-sided patch up and over the fender itself. And this is really what we're looking for. This is the kind of control that we want. We could carry this T-point back further, but again, we don't need that level of control. We have everything we need just with the little bit of work that we've done. Now, this right here is a bit more exaggerated than the actual car. This actually comes out a bit. So remember that we have control over the tangency of these edges, but in this case, we have enough control that I can pull some vertices up. So what I'm going to do is I want to keep the shape of it. I'm going to take these two vertices. I'm going to do this from the side, double click on the mouse wheel to fit and zoom in over here. And then we're going to simply pull these up. And what I'm doing is I'm keeping them at the same width in respect to the x-axis, but I'm bringing them up to give me more of that flare. I'm going to bring this one up a little bit as well. And what I'm doing is I'm carrying that body line out a bit more, and then it's going to roll down into this flare. The reason I'm doing that is, again, later on, we might get rid of this crease and try to bevel that edge and add some edges. And this is going to make that transition much better. It's much more realistic. So this is pretty good progress. I mean, at this point, we have made the vast majority of the midline of the car, and it looks pretty good. From here, we need to make some design decisions. Do we carry the car down, and do we keep progressing down? If we do we actually include that midline, or do we just carry the body down and do we cut it out later? There's not really a right or a wrong answer, but it is important to note that the Fusion 360 form tools do have limitations. So some of the decisions that we make are probably going to make our life a little bit harder. And then last, we need to start building the top of this. And there are a couple of approaches that we could take to do that. We could select some of these surfaces. We could begin just simply pulling them up or extruding them. Or we can start to build the other panels as their own surfaces. Like we could build the roof line and the A pillar back into the C pillar or sail panel, and then we can figure out how to combine that to the rest of the body. Again, there's not really a right or a wrong way, but there are different approaches that we could choose. At this point, let's go ahead and save one more time, make sure we don't lose any work. And then, as always, thanks for watching. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments, but I'll see you in the next one.